he said it was like him against four guys at the Hart Plaza. He was like, I wish I would have had y'all with me and stuff like that. Then it would have been pretty even, you know. I was like, what'd you go down there by yourself for, you know? Because usually, no matter what we all did, we always had a crew with us, you know. And just once in a while, though, you know, you possibly be by yourself. And most of the time, if you was by yourself, sometimes that's when things would pop off, you know, because people wouldn't even approach you if you had a group of people with you, you know. But that's how it was back then. And but them two dudes were cool. I don't know where they, you know, got off to and stuff like that, but they was two cool dudes we had met and in the neighborhood, stuff like that. I know this other cat that I like. He was a cool guy. His name was Sean. And I met him over on off of Toledo. And he lived in an apartment building over there. So did I. I lived in an apartment building over there, big building. And when I first met him, me and him started talking stuff. He was just a cool dude. He had good vibes about him and stuff like that. And, you know, the whole time I knew him, I just thought he was a cool dude. You know, we did a lot of things together. We worked together, drink together. And he just was a cool dude. And he ran around some with my brother-in-law and stuff like that. Matter of fact, I think they took a trip to Missouri one time, just my brother-in-law and him. And I believe it was my brother-in-law's uncle who passed away, and then they drove a Mustang. They left Detroit and they drove a Mustang to Missouri and stuff like that. And, but anyways, he's a cool dude. I don't know if he's where he got off to, you know, because over the years, you know, you start losing touch with a lot of people and stuff like that. But, you know, over time, you know, there's a lot of people I've met over the years that were just cool people, you know what I mean? And, you know, we had a lot of good times together, partied together, ran around together, worked together, just all kind of stuff. I remember one time we was working together and we had to go pick him up. And at this time, he's not living on Toledo. He's living over there off of Dix by Casey Fence Company. And he had a basement apartment. And we go to pick him up. We knock on his door. And we had to wake him up. And he had two chicks in there with him that spent the night with him. And then we was like, well, once we seen them two girls, we was like, well, are you going to be working today or what? And he's like, yeah, they going to stay here. I'm going to work. And at that time, we're working at the Willer Hotel, painting downtown on Cass Avenue. But that dude, he used to trip me out and stuff like that because he drank plenty of beer. And back then, we all drank plenty of beer at times. And I remember that day that we knocked on his door to see if he was going to go to work. And he got up. And the first thing he said, we was in the living room, you know, and he got up and he walked out of his bedroom. And he was like, damn, who shit in my mouth? And we started laughing. We was like, what are you talking about? And what it was is he drunk so much beer the night before that he had like brown on his teeth, and it's from all the beer that he drunk. And we was laughing our ass off. We thought that was real funny. Dude just had a way with words and stuff like that, and just the things that he would say just trip you out. But he was a cool dude, and he was something else. Then another dude that that we knew, he worked at Casey Fence Company. His name was Bob. He was a welder at Casey's Fence Company when I worked at the fence company. And he was pretty cool too, I never had no issues with him or anything like that. Actually, one time when I first started working here, I had what I was doing is fabbing gates. And what that is, just the frame that he would weld the frame, and I would put the wire on the frame. And it'd be like big sliding gates that, slide electric gates that slide on the wheels, stuff like that. And he was showing me a little bit about welding and stuff like that. That's where I actually learned a little bit about welding. And he was a pretty cool dude, but the boss that we had there, he was all right, but sometimes he would just get all amped up and stuff like that, and he would just go off the deep end on different people for different things. It really was, uncalled for, stuff like that. But he saved a lot of people, basically, a lot of his workers, a lot of times they'd get off on the weekend and be drinking. And, I know some incidents where some guys got put in jail and he would have to get them out of jail. Then I know some incidents where some guys got well intoxicated and left Michigan, ended up in Alabama. And then once they sobered up and realized what they did, they would call him and he would send them a bus ticket to come back. That's a crazy shit to happen to Casey Fence Company. But he used to save a lot of people's asses, though, really. And I remember one time, me and the Little Huck, and if y'all know who the Little Huck is, I've talked about him on some other audios that I got on my channel. And one Friday I go to work, and he had just recently bought this brand new red truck with the gates around a flatbed truck with gates around it. And it was to, when people would order fence material, brand new fence material, a lot of times they want you to haul it to their house, So this lady way out in Michigan, in the state of Michigan, way out, maybe Bloomfield Hills or something like that. It was way out. And she ordered a bunch of fence material, but she's going to have her sons put the fence up. But she wanted us to deliver. So the boss tells me and the Little Huck, and Little Huck's going to drive the truck. And they got it all loaded for us. Me and him didn't have to load it, but they had it all loaded for us. And then he checked to make sure everything was on the truck. And then we was going to head out. And this was going to take our whole day because we were going to have to drive way out there, unload everything, and then drive way back. But this guy, the little Huck, he used to get amped up a lot too, and but he was a drinker. So when we get going out there, he pulls. We don't even get too far away from the fence company, and he pulls to the liquor store, Frank's Liquor on Burner, and sometimes we call it the 2 o'clock store. But anyways, he pulls over there and he goes in there and he gets a big bag of Cheetos, and then he gets 4 40-ounce Busch beer. And then he comes back to the truck because I sat waiting in the truck, and he comes back. Then he gives me a beer, and then he's got a beer, and then we're headed out. And then we drink them 2 beers. And when we get there, we unload all the stuff behind the lady's house. And she's a real nice lady. And she's got lounge chairs out there in the back of her patio. And what they're going to do is put a big fence around the backyard. And we get it all unloaded, and she comes out of the house with a 12-pack of beer. And we're just, she said, y'all have a seat and stuff like that. And she just wanted to shoot the breeze and drink some beer. So here we are, we're way out. We're drinking these beers with her, talking to her and stuff. And I see that he's getting real tipsy. I'm getting tipsy. And then he tells her, well, we're going to have to get going. And then on the way back, we still got the 2 40 ounces that we had her put in the refrigerator while we was there. And we're drinking them on the way back. And, and we're eating Cheetos and stuff. And this is a brand new truck. And when we get back to the fence company, there's Cheetos all over the seat, all in the floor. We stepped on some Cheetos and stuff like that. And we're pretty buzzed, And then he pulls in there, and then we have to go into the office to get our check and stuff like that. And it's the end of the day. And then the boss gets real mad, but he don't say nothing to the little Huck. But that's his buddy, they run around together some. And he starts, getting on me and about the Cheetos all in the truck and all that. And I was like, I didn't buy the Cheetos. I said, the Huck bought the Cheetos. And what it was, he just didn't want to say nothing to his friend, but he was just going to try to, get grim with me. But, I was the type of guy back then, I would just put you in the spot. I don't care who you was, So then anyways, I, said a few words to him, and then he said, well, can you at least clean the Cheetos out of the truck before you go home? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And what had happened is, though, actually, it wasn't like we was just throwing Cheetos all in the truck. We was eating them, and then he had the bag between us in the seat, and he had to stop the brake one time on the way back, and a lot of them just fell out the bag into the floor, and that's what happened. But anyways, I cleaned up the Cheetos and stuff like that, and and then he was like, wonder why he's so mad, man. And I was like, I don't know why he's mad, because it ain't nothing to clean them up, stuff like that. And I think what it was, he really didn't want to say he was just complaining about the Cheetos, but I think he was mad because we was actually on the clock and we was, drinking. We basically drunk there while we were there and on the way back, So I think that was what he was mad about, but he didn't want to say nothing to his partner, which was the little Huck. And he was just trying to come at me, but I wasn't having it. We wasn't gonna go that route. And so he just asked me, could I at least clean the Cheetos up out the truck before I go home? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. But I said, you need to cool your attitude though, because you know, you know. So finally he apologized, stuff like that, and then we ended up just leaving and going to the bar after that, anyways. And sometimes he'd go with us, Sometimes he'd go with us to. We'd go to Milo's bar and stuff like that. Sometimes he'd go and have a few beers and then go home or whatever. But he was just always a lot of, it wouldn't take much to get him fired up. And once he got going, he was just, he was a cool dude, you know what I mean? And, we worked for him and stuff like that. But sometimes he would just, go off for different things, and basically the Cheeto thing, I thought it was just, I think he was mad because of the alcohol, really, but he didn't want to say nothing about the alcohol. He was just saying something about the Cheetos. So, but that's just one incident. I remember hanging out with some friends of mine on the weekend, and they was getting a refrigerator gave to them from somebody they knew, and they knew I worked at the fence company, and they was like, you think you could borrow one of them trucks? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. And so I went to work one day, and I told them, can I borrow a pickup truck to go pick up a refrigerator? And he was like, yeah. And I took this green truck, went and picked up the refrigerator, and then dropped it off to him, and then went back to work. So in that sense, the boss was cool about stuff like that. Sometimes he would even let you borrow a truck to take home with you if you needed transportation or something. So, he was cool to work with and stuff. He just would get amped up, and then he would blow things out of proportion and stuff like that. But all in all, he's a cool dude, and but he would go after at a lot of people that worked at the company, just depending on what it was, he just blew up a lot, and then later he would apologize to you. He was like one of them kind of dudes. but he was all right, But that being said about the fence company, I'm gonna leave it right there, and y'all, everybody needs to subscribe, hit the like and the notification bell. Be looking out for the next audio. Later, I'll have some videos coming. Just go ahead and support the channel, subscribe, hit the like, notification. And there's many stories to come. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.